Questions and comments. The honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
And thank you to the member. Mr. Speaker, I want to come back to a comment that the member made at the beginning of his speech. He was talking about this privilege debate, that it's the longest in Canadian history, and he hasn't seen anything like this in almost 20 years in this chamber. And you know, I haven't been here as long as this member has been. He was talking about how long he's been here, but it's my understanding, as my colleague was just mentioning, that the only Prime Minister to have been found in contempt of Parliament was Prime Minister Stephen Harper, which is, of course, as the member's mentioning how long he's been here, a government that this member was part of. What I'm wondering is why, you know, the current Prime Minister perhaps would be held in contempt, but we'll never know because the Conservatives are filibustering their own motion. And so my question is, why are the Conservatives letting the Prime Minister off the hook instead of getting the answers that we need?
The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
There is some. There's some pretzel twisting you'd have to do to follow the logic of the question from the honourable colleague that just asked me the question. Anyway, I was here so I'll just let Canadians know this is how this works. Basically, it's found in contempt by a vote of Parliament. This is a minority Parliament where Stephen Harper and the Conservatives and I was a member of the Conservative Party. We had 124 members of Parliament, and we don't have any natural allies here. We are the only political entity in this chamber that is actually on one side of the political spectrum. All the other political parties lean heavily to the other side of the spectrum, so they can make any motion, any fabrication that they want, pass it because they will have the numbers to do so anytime the Conservatives are in a minority scenario. To follow up on the rest of her question, it was I was here, it was a kangaroo court, I watched the whole thing. Is it parliamentary? Yes. Is it actually contempt? No, there was no contempt. But to answer the question that my colleague actually asked, and I appreciate the fact that the NDP hasn't folded up its tent and gone home yet on this. I mean, any point in time the NDP could change its tune and allow the government off the hook. If she wants to hold the Liberal Prime Minister to contempt, I suggest that she try a unanimous consent motion and see what happens.
Yeah, good idea.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for the speech, and I would just follow up on the last question. I'd like to ask him if the NDP was putting forward a motion to actually find this Prime Minister in contempt, which I do find this Prime Minister in contempt of Parliament several times in this Parliament since I've been here 5 years, not 19 like my colleague. Can I ask him which NDP party he think will show up, the one that actually is an opposition party or the one that is actually in the back pocket of this Prime Minister?
Yeah, exactly.
The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
I want to apologies to the interpreters there. I'll leave that desktop alone. I want to thank my colleague for his question. Look, the reality is, Mr. Speaker, he asked a very important question. Whenever it comes to standing up and lecturing or trying to appear virtuous, the NDP always, at least in appearances, tries to appear that they're doing what they say they're doing. But every time the rubber hits the road, when it comes to the point of decision, when it really matters, which is when we vote, the NDP always votes opposite of everything that they say. And we witnessed it this week. We actually put the words in a motion of the NDP leader himself. And the NDP leader and his caucus voted against the very words he said, the very position he took. No one can ever believe anything the leader of the NDP ever says ever again.
And comments, and I know because the honourable member stood up long enough there. The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Thank you very much, because the member was knowingly misleading the House. No contempt, he said. There was no contempt.
I know we're getting all right. That's so far almost over the edge. So I'm just going to ask the member maybe to rethink that line and go at it again. The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Was contempt. The member knows there was contempt. The contempt that was shown by the Harper government is very clear to Canadians. The contempt of the Harper government was adjudicated here in the House. So the member knows full well that there was contempt. He knows full well the long litany of Harper scandals, how deplorable they were to veterans and seniors, how bad that government was, how abysmally bad, and the scandals of billions of dollars far beyond the STDC. The NDP has gotten to the bottom of every one of the Liberal scandals. We weren't able to get to the bottom of Conservative scandals because each and every time showing complete contempt for democratic processes and getting any sort of transparency at all, the Harper government shut it down. But to clarify, Mr. Speaker, because this member knows full well, and he needs to come clean with Canadians. The Harper government was found in contempt by this Parliament, and he has to admit it. Will he admit the contempt charge that was adjudicated and resolved here on the floor of the House of Commons?
Member for Red Deer Lacombe.
You know, it never ceases to amaze me that the member for New Westminster Burnaby conflates issues the way that he actually does. Now, the Harper government probably spent money in a way that the NDP didn't agree with, but it actually led to one of the most prosperous times in Canadian history. As a matter of fact, at the end of the Harper era in government, the Canadian household income was every bit as wealthy and on par with that of the United States of America. Now we actually...
Order. I did give the honourable member plenty of time to ask his question, so I'm hoping that he will allow. I hope that he will allow the honourable member. I would hope the honourable member would allow him to answer it.
I've asked a specific question.
The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
You would notice, Mr. Speaker, that I did not interrupt the member when he was asking his question, which was full of so many falsehoods, I couldn't even begin to name all of them, but I'm not afforded the same courtesy back when I'm answering the question. I'll continue on, Mr. Speaker. The difference now between the median household income of a Canadian versus that of an American has never been wider than it is now, and that only took 9 years of a Prime Minister, the Prime Minister, where I've never seen a collection of bad ideas, bad judgment, and bad leadership. And it just amazes me that the New Democrats would support somebody with that many strikes against him.